Welcome back to the Hoopball YouTube channel. It is mock draft 2.0 time, our first mock in a couple of weeks here, and I am very excited to dive into this. I mean, there's so many things to go over. NBA Media Day, ESPN rankings, the whole lot, and I'm so thrilled to be joined by one of the experts at RotoWire. You might have even read him on Yahoo, CBS, the great Alex Rikleen. Thanks for joining us, man. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction. I'm excited to be here. Excited to do a draft.
Yep, as am I. This is like you and I were talking about offline. This is not only our first draft since NBA Media Day, but also our first draft on ESPN. So there's a whole lot to look forward to here. I mean, we have a whole rankings list on ESPN that's worth its own conversation in its own right. It'll be interesting to see how some of the news that's come out over the last couple of days are shaking up draft boards. So, if y'all are as excited as we are, please follow along in the comments. Drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. We are going to be rolling with stuff like this, taking you all the way through the NBA season and beyond. So do check that out. And some of the other stuff that we've got up there. It's pretty cool. So Alex, we got a minute to go before the draft goes live. How about this? Let's talk about just ESPN ranks for a 9-cat league.
Are you telling me that you don't think Ben Simmons is the 30th player head-to-head right now?
I would not. I would say that might be a bit of a stretch. If you guys can see down here, yeah, there's Ben at number 30. That is incredibly high. Some other names that stick out in that range. You have DeJounte Murray at 27. That's pretty high. Zion Williamson at 13. That's higher than his already sky-high ADP on Yahoo, which is somewhere in the 20s.
Yeah.
And, a big explanation for a lot of this is that ESPN is, as a site, they're far more centric to points leagues, right? So this is really what drives that influencer there.
They're far more centric to points leagues, and the process for creating these lists has led to frustration amongst some of the analysts who face out over the years. So it's unclear who makes these ranks, but it's not the people you go to read when you go to ESPN News.
Yeah, it's honestly, to me, I've never really done a league on ESPN, and see, depending on how this night goes and how successful you and I wind up in our drafts, maybe this will inspire all of you to hop on here, because I think that there is a lot of potential in 9-cat leagues, and we're underway, by the way. I'm pretty sure we've already got one pick off the board. Nikola Jokic, number 1.
No surprise.
Pretty straightforward pick. Yeah, right. Like, would you have done anything different?
Nope. And Curry, number 2. I think that's the clear answer. I'm surprised that it's not consensus so far. So good way, wrong way. Good job, wrong way, Ricky. I think you nailed it.
I agree. Yeah, Steph is, I think, a very clear number 2 in all 9-cat settings. And then the elusive number 3 pick. This is a tough one. I think you can go a multitude of different directions here. If this were you, who would you be leaning?
I would be going Harden right now, which is a change from where I was a couple of days ago. Before Media Day, before we had all of Kyrie shenanigans, I had KD there. When you break down, there's very limited data from what happened when all 3 of the Nets' big 3 were together last year. Going to sidetrack the conversation to talk about this for a minute because I think it's really important.
No, by all means.
When you look, there were only 7 games that they played together during the regular season. One of them, KD, only played like 19 minutes. I think he got hurt and, it was something minor. But so there's limited data. But when you look at those games, when you kind of dive into what was happening and how it was broken down, KD was KD. He lost roughly 1 shot per game. And otherwise, his numbers were basically exactly what he's been throughout his career, and with just like a tiny, tiny bit taken off. Harden was the one who had the biggest change, and so I actually dropped him. I had him at 9 going into Media Day, but that was assuming all 3 of them were playing together. Oh, I'm up, and
we're on the clock.
Look at who's coming. Ooh, this is fun. I'm at 6. My number 6, if we're gonna play, KD is still here, so let's do what I was saying and draft
nice
KD.
segue right there, yeah.
Yeah. So we got 3 Giannis, 4 Harden, 5 Karl Anthony Towns, and 6 KD.
Yeah.
I think basically from 3 to 7 and arguably to 9 is almost flat, and you really can't go wrong there. We are very much splitting hairs. But
you said till 9, right? That was where your cutoff was?
Yeah, that's my cutoff.
I am at pick 10, so that's interesting. We'll see. We will see. But I like that rationale. I similarly had Durant ranked a little higher than all 3 of these guys. I think that I was a little encouraged by what James Harden said about his debut season in Brooklyn last year. I think that he copped to the fact that he showed up out of shape, and by the way, I'm on the clock. So.
Well, he did.
I mean, he just did. It was just an objective truth, and I think that it's correct of him to make that point. I think that he's taking a little more accountability in that regard this year, and I'd be curious to see if he's a little more comfortable in that offense, and maybe he's a little more aggressive on that, especially if Kyrie is not going to be available there. For my 10th pick, I'm going to go with Anthony Davis. I'm going to, for the sake of conversation, I'm going to let this draft clock kind of get down to the end there. But I'm very interested in AD this year. I know that a lot of analysts out there are pretty down on him. The argument that this is he was just so injury prone last year that he is now in a situation where Russell Westbrook's in town to steal rebounds as he has in every stop before. But I just have a feeling that the Lakers have an incredibly important need to get a top 3 seed in the playoffs this year after what happened last year. And I think that now that they're not coming off of that bubble run, I think AD was very fatigued from that. And I think a lot of his dip in production could be attributed to that. I think that he could be in for a bounce back year, and he might be their most reliable player of those 3. I mean, do you have a take on the Lakers' big 3 this year? Are you really down on anyone in particular? Really high on any of them?
Not really. I'm higher on Westbrook than I've been in a while. Ooh, Beal, is that an auto pick?
It might have been. It might not have been. I mean, it's not exactly outside the typical range we see from him, but of course we do have that update from him about his vaccine status. That it's.
Sorry, Stevie C, if that wasn't an auto pick. Or sorry, Sexland, if that wasn't an auto pick. But needless to say, I don't have Bradley Beal that high. I had Beal roughly in the 14 range before 14, 15 range before the unvaccinated stuff. And I mean, my personal philosophy on these unvaccinated players is you got to drop unless Wiggins and Kyrie are a little different because they'll miss home games because of it. The ones who aren't in New York or in San Fran, they're not going to miss home games over it, but they might miss some games. They might have a harder, positive tests happen and you can return quicker if you are vaccinated than if you're not. Those are just rules. And so you got to drop anyone who we know is unvaccinated down a spot or 2, 3 to 5, whatever. But fantasy is supposed to be fun. I don't want to root for someone who's going online and spouting stupid stuff. That's not fun for me. So I'm knocking Bradley Beal down 3, 4, 5 spots based on the news. And then personally, I'm knocking him another 6 or 7 because I don't want to root for him. I'm hoping someone else takes him so that I don't have to.
Well, that's exactly what happened. And just to put a cap on that, where would you feel that? What point's too far for him to fall for you?
For Beal, too far to fall is probably around 2021. But he's probably going to go before then. And so great. I don't, that's my goal is for it to not be my problem.
It seems that it would be, I'd be surprised if he goes that low, but that's a fair, absolutely at that range is going to be, well, I guess you never really know. This is still us in the early phases of learning exactly how the public is going to react to this information. And of course, ESPN has him so high. Maybe this isn't the right draft to learn more about Beal's status going forward. But I agree that a knock is necessary, and also that it is just better to have guys that you can root for on your fantasy team.
Yeah, it's supposed to be fun. To look back at a couple of picks we didn't really mention, Jason Tatum went at 7. I think most people would see that as high. I don't. He's my 7. I think that's great pick. I love it.
Oop. You are on the clock now. Just to go through the rest of these picks here, at 8, we had Damian Lillard. 9, Luka, which is honestly a pretty fair spot for Luka in a 9-cat draft. I'm pleased to see that one there. I went with AD at 10, Bradley Beal at 11, Embiid 12, Paul George at 13, Vucevic. I went with Jimmy Butler at the turn. Following a little bit into this build that I'm rolling with, cutting out threes in particular and assists. If any of y'all are in the draft and are listening, I guess that's where I'm going. But I like pairing those two together in that regard. And I think they complement each other pretty well. And then we have Bam Adebayo, Trae Young, and Domantas Sabonis right after them. And now Alex on the clock.
Yeah. So, talking about unvaccinated people and knocking him down a few spots. I had Michael Porter Jr. at 12, but before we found out today that he's unvaccinated. But we've fallen. We're now at pick 19. That's at some point that's a lot of value, and at least with Michael Porter Jr., he's not like advocating people stay unvaxxed. He's just not getting it. So it's a little bit, at least, by my mindset, a little bit less annoying. And so I am going to take Michael Porter Jr. here right before the clock runs out. And I love the pairing of Porter Jr. with Kevin Durant. You're not usually going to be able to get that unless normally to get that pairing, you're going to have like a 7th or 8th pick and hope KD falls. Right. Porter Jr. kind of fell a little bit here, but that sets you up with just such great percentage starts, such great point start, and really good rebounds for a team that doesn't have a center yet. So I like the way that those two go together. And then Van Vliet went right after. Love Van Vliet that right there. I think I have it at like 14 or something. I think that's a big value there.
I agree. De'Aaron Fox and Zion Williamson going back to back there. I think two guys that are pretty high selections in a 9-category league. So why don't we I'm more interested in talking about Zion right now because you see him going this high in most draft settings. Yahoo, Fantrax, it's pretty consistent. One of those big stories from Media Day was the revelation somehow that Zion, I don't know how that this went undisclosed to the public, but Zion fractured his foot about 2 months ago, around Summer League time. I already thought that being in the 20s was too high in a 9-cat league. Now I'm even more concerned about this notion that he might not be ready for the start of the year. What are your thoughts on Williamson at this range and perhaps in a head-to-head format?
No, I don't want it.
Yeah.
No, don't. You can't take a 400-pound man, the most athletic 400-pound man in the history of the universe, but a 400-pound man with a broken foot. You can't. In this as your second pick, you're just asking for problems. Foot injuries are some of the hardest to recover from in many sports, and basketball included. Yeah. Obviously, Zion's not 400 pounds, but we haven't seen someone with that strength and girth and build. Mm-hmm. I am terrified of what that is going to do. If you can get him at the end of a third, I love it. Because just the upside is so high. Yeah. But as your second player off the board, I think my guess is you're losing more leagues than you're winning with that.
Yeah, it's a lot to justify. And look, in a 9-category league, the biggest drawbacks with Zion are his really poor free throw percentage. Really high volume guy, misses about 2 to 2.5 per game, which is a killer in that respect. Still no 3-point shot, isn't really getting involved in assists. It's just that you're limiting yourself in a lot of different ways. It works in certain punt builds, and I guess that's the argument that you can make if you're deciding to punt free throw percentage. That makes him a second-round type of player. But generally speaking, you have to be thinking with that type of mindset to go with him in that direction, in my opinion.
Yeah, and DeJounte Murray, whoa.
That's a part of the ESPN rankings, I think. Yeah. Maybe not. I mean, a lot of hypes on DeJounte. This is about as early as I have seen him.
I haven't seen him go that high.
This is like the best case scenario, right, for DeJounte, maybe even a little higher than that for this year.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where, like, I actually, he went at what, pick 28?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked if you told me he finished at 28th, but I think you're paying for all the upside. You're not getting any of the benefit of, being high on him.
There's a lot of guys. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just talking through my thoughts because I'm on the clock now. This is a guy who I'm getting. I've had Michael Porter Jr. a bunch, and I think he pairs well with Michael Porter Jr. I'm also surprised that he's this low, and that's Devin Booker. I just don't fully understand. It's the first year I've ever had Devin Booker in teams, and I'm getting him in a lot of places. In the third round, I just think that there's a lot of upside. Chris Paul probably won't play as many games as he played last year.
So that's the thing, right? I mean, like Booker was a first round target last year. The Chris Paul effect is really kind of what shook things up there. So but in your opinion, you feel that Chris Paul is going, whether it's injury or just a decision from the Suns to rest him, you think that there'll be he'll dial back this year?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. You can't. It's a shortened off season. And his history and how late they were playing into the season, and just looking at what happened to the Lakers last season, and looking at what happened to all of the teams that made the conference finals last season when you had this shortened off season. If the Suns don't force Chris Paul to rest more games, then that's gross mismanagement on their part. And also, I think Devin Booker's really good. I think that just another year in the system, and another year of him developing, and another year of him learning from Chris Paul, he's going to just have, small percent more of the role anyways, even if Chris Paul does play every game again. So I really like Devin Booker in the mid-third. I'd be happy to take him several picks earlier. And, again, he's someone who is excellent at points and both percentages. I really like the way my team is going so far.
So to recap some of these other picks that have gone by, LeBron and Julius Randle rounded out the end of round 2. A little high for my tastes on both in the 9-cat league, but that's
a little high, but reasonable.
Reasonable, exactly. It's not like Zion or DeJounte at that spot. Donovan Mitchell going after them, LaMelo Ball, Rudy Gobert. Those three are generally getting drafted in that range in most other platforms than DeJounte. Kyrie went before Booker, which is an interesting note. I mean, can certainly in a head-to-head league in particular, regardless of the whole vaccination situation, he is a very tricky player because of his tendency to miss games to injury or personal reasons, like we saw last year. But obviously a first-round player when he's playing games. So it is, there's a lot of risk there. SGA going there at number pick 7 of round 3, Drew Holiday and Zach LaVine, leading to me on the clock. I know who I'm gonna go with here. I think that this guy fits nicely with the build that I'm rolling with. Alex, just out of curiosity, I want to talk a little bit about SGA. He is someone who has a lot of hype last year and still has a lot this year. Is making the same as Trae Young and Luka Doncic just signed his rookie extension. And I think that a lot of the apprehension in head-to-head leagues with SGA is this Oklahoma City Thunder's tendency to rest anyone. I mean, they'll do the vets. They were load managing 22-year-old Lou Dort last year. There is no bottom of the barrel in that regard. Do you feel that this year, though, that they're going to – I mean, SGA had plantar fasciitis. That was the rub, and perhaps it was something that legitimately held him out. Do you think that the Oklahoma City Thunder want him to play down the stretch this year, though?
No. No, I don't.
Will they then?
I think that they probably know that they're playing with fire. The last thing you want is for the NBA to force you to hire a Colangelo. And so I don't think they're going to rest SGA for the last 20 games or whatever it was last year. But no, I do think he rests. I think he takes, a veteran number of rest games in the first half of the year and probably misses, the last 10 or so. I think they're less egregious about it, but I do think he misses time. An incredible talent, a fun to root for guy. But he's another one who the third round just strikes me as a little early. I feel like you're at his upside there. Who did you take? You took DeAndre Ayton. Yeah,
I took
he was at
DeAndre
the top
Ayton.
of my queue.
Yeah, I'm continuing. Well, first of all, I think that Ayton, he had a rough start to the Chris Paul era in Phoenix, but we saw him bounce back in a big way down the stretch. I think I got him at pick 34. I can definitely see him finishing around there at this range. Maybe reached a little bit. I mean, apparently, well, I guess I would have maybe taken him on the turn there, but I really like how he fits with Anthony Davis and Jimmy Butler. Again, I'm punting threes, and I'm looking to punt assists as well in this build. I try and go one or two categories in a head-to-head league, and I feel that those are two. Assists.
I don't think you reached. I thought you got a value.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about him in that spot, and obviously you're high on him too.
Yeah.
Between him and Devin Booker, just real quick, because you were high on Booker too. Of those, which do you think finishes higher in a 9-cat league of those teammates?
Booker, but I think it's real close. I at the moment in my ranks right now, I have them actually all three of them, Booker, Ayton, and Chris Paul, back to back, and that's not because they're teammates. It's just like that's where I landed on them, and I have them all right next to each other, clumped at 24, 25, 26.
So a couple other guys off the board: Chris Paul right after Ayton, Russell Westbrook, an interesting target in a head-to-head league. So, this guy's fallen all over the map, but better than in Yahoo, where his ADP is like 20 something. So this is at least more reasonable than that. Jaylen Brown going after them, and Chris Middleton. I'm now on the clock, and I don't necessarily think this is a reach in a 9-cat league. Apparently, ESPN does, and I'm just scrolling by. I'm just noticing Montrezl Harrell here at 50. What's going on here? Are you kidding me? Anyway, down all the way at 71, I'm going with OG Anunoby as my 4th round pick here. I think that he's going to take a big step forward as an offensive leader on that team this year. I think that he's a defensive ace already. I love his combination of steals, low turnovers, good percentages. I think also fits the build I'm going for pretty well. And we'll see how that pans out as we go forward. Then Ingram, and now Ben Simmons off the board. The Ben Simmons one is a guy everyone wants to talk about. The trade rumors are with that whole situation. We've talked it to death at this point. But in terms of fantasy basketball, how do you go about Ben Simmons? Let's say best case scenario, you're punting free throws, right, or in threes. Like Ben Simmons fits your build perfectly. Do you take him? Do you take a risk on him at any point?
Yeah, but not this high.
Even in that build.
Even in that build, because I especially this high, I am a little risk averse in early rounds, and I don't think I don't trust. When people show you who they are, believe them. And what we've seen from Morey says that he's not going to sell, below what he thinks is a good deal for him.
Yeah.
And I don't think that deal's going to be there. And so I think he's going to have his hand really forced by Ben Simmons missing games. And I believe Ben Simmons will miss games and miss game checks.
Right.
And so I am afraid of missed games there. I'm a little afraid of potential landing spots, but not really. I would try to hold out to the 5th round. And I think in a lot of leagues you can get him in the 5th round. So I'm not going to hate on the pick in the 4th, but I would rather the 5th round for Ben Simmons, and he's got to fit your bill.
Yes, he is very dependent on, he's very dependent on those set of circumstances to be effective in a 9-cat league.
So I'm on the clock, and Middleton and Brandon Ingram were guys who I was targeting, and both of them are now gone. Mm-hmm. And with Michael Porter Jr., again, he's a player who is sort of a weirdo and shapes how you got to make some other decisions, especially in a head-to-head league. So I think I am probably punting assists, which means that someone like Clint Capella really appeals to me. I am a little worried about it. He was great last year in Atlanta and after the trade the year before. But Atlanta does have other very good centers. So there is some risk here. But I think he just fits the build so well. The free throws hurt, but I've got some of the best free throw percentage players in the game right now. I can take one somewhat low value guy, somewhat low impact in terms of just he doesn't take a ton of free throws guy, and and hope to build back with some later picks. But now I've got that boost in rebounding. I've got some defense against teams that are bad. So.
And I put your team up here on the board. You guys looked at mine plenty. We have Devin Booker, Durant, Michael Porter Jr., and Clint Capella. You have definitely have enough to withstand Capella's drawbacks. And I agree that when Atlanta has Onyeka Okongwu back, there is incentive to perhaps try and rest Clint Capella for certain stretches after he played so much for them last year. And then also to develop a guy who they're very high on as an organization. Now we have, right after you, Kristaps Porzingis went with then Lonzo Ball and Christian Wood. I'm really high on Christian Wood this year. A guy who had a lot of hype last year. Sorry?
High for Ball. It's high for Ball.
It is high for Ball. And it's a little high for Kristaps too in a head-to-head league, to be honest, even if the perfect stuff would justify that. But, let's talk about Lonzo or Christian. I'll let you go first on that. Which you think that Ball's going too high here?
I actually think Christian is probably going to be a more interesting conversation, so I'm going to lean on him just because I'm going to disagree with you on Christian. I'm actually kind of out. Everything we've seen from him over the last year and a half is excellent, and says that statistically this is a totally reasonable spot to take him, but Houston's weird and don't trust tanking teams, and there's some injury history. Are we going to get some? I'm not saying his name right yet. Şengün, I think.
Yes, Şengün.
Is he going to cut into Christian Wood's minutes? Are they going to do weird centerless lineups? Because why not? Are they going to I'm wary. I want a bunch of Rockets on my team, but I don't want the top Rocket off the board. I want a bunch of Rockets picked between 90 and 130.
And I agree in that respect. There's another Rocket that I'm really high on that I hope I can get on the turn back. Once you get to that top 100 picks range. And part of why I'm high on Wood is that when I feel that there was sort of a lethargic kind of hey, the Rockets are dialing back and we want to tank. And I think that really poor stretch from him down the stretch was team influenced. But up to that point, I feel that, once you could sort of cut off when the Rockets stopped trying, Wood's production fell off, but he was around a top 35 guy in that respect, which that same situation could easily happen again this year, though, which probably makes him a more appealing roto target for me than in head-to-head, just if I want to make sure I have someone ready for the playoffs. But I really don't have an issue getting him at that particular spot of the fourth round. Following him, by the way, Yusuf Nurkic, John Moran, and DeMar DeRozan off the board. Pretty high. Not surprised to see Morant go there just because of the name recognition. I think that it is too high. I am interested in DeMar DeRozan at that spot, which also seems relatively high. I do notice that this was on the turn, so maybe there's a particular build here with Jay Collins that he's going with. Here's his team up on the left.
It is high compared to ADP, but I don't hate it. I'm surprised his ADP is as low as it is. Ooh, I don't like Levert or Rozier there.
Tough on Levert given the news and the ambiguity around a fractured back, I believe it is. That's tough, but
I don't love either of those. I like the Draymond Green pick, second pick of round 5. That's great value.
Yeah,
that's great value on that.
And then Rashawn Holmes, hoop ball staple, going there to Team JS. I think that's a very solid spot.
Great value for Holmes. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, back to you, Alex. I'm seeing David Williams smack talking me in the chat. By the way, I want you to know that there's no hair product. You would have lost money on that. That would have been fun.
So, I think I gotta go. My pick is going to be a little bit different, again, because of the build. You got to modify for your build. I'm going to go with CJ McCollum here. I think he complements this build great. Another sort of low assist guy that has enough assists that maybe I'll get a win or two against the worst teams in the league, but I'm going to be bad in assists. But good percentages, high scorer. again does a little bit to balance out that hit from Capella in the free throw, like make me feel a little bit better there.
Right.
So I'm going to end up going with McCollum. There are a couple names on the board that I like better than McCollum in a vacuum. Tyrese Halliburton, Jaren Jackson, Nurkic just went. Darius Garland is someone who I would consider here if I wanted assists.
Same.
But because of my specific team, I went with CJ.
And I don't have an issue with that in a vacuum either, really. Regardless of your build, I think that's a fair spot for him. I mean, just torrid stretch last year before he went down with that foot injury. It'll be interesting to see if he can replicate that in a healthy season this year. So we are kind of at the midway point. We're on pick 55 now. So something that's interesting between both you and I to this point, neither of us have traditional point guards. And obviously because we are punting assists, was that decision to punt, was that based off of your first round pick, which it was for me too, and I'm assuming it also is for you in some element, but I also feel like this is a particularly deeper year for point guards, at least in terms of guys who could produce. Centers have been a topic of conversation as players who get snatched up really quickly. Do you feel that there's some advantage to you and I being in this situation to target some late guards with this open roster spot?
I'm punting more because my second pick than my first. I think Kevin Durant. You can do anything with Kevin Durant. You can do anything with Kevin Durant, but Michael Porter Jr. is a little limiting. I think it's going to be worth it. I think he's going to do enough in the things he's good at. But and you're on the clock now. But yeah, I think that there is enough point guard value. But again, it's something you can't go too long on the point guards. The point guards, the centers dry up first. And there are some point guards that I really like in this 50 to 85 range. But I do think that once you get to 85, it does, point guard also falls off a cliff. While you're thinking, I'm going to point out right after I went was Anthony Edwards. I think that's fantastic value at, the seventh pick of round 5. I actually have him at 35 overall on my big board, but I didn't think he fit this build. I have him way ahead of CJ McCollum in a vacuum. So I thought that was an excellent value, excellent pick.
Well, I think I'm going point guard at this spot. It might be a little higher than I would have maybe hoped to see if I got him at the turn, but I like the prospect for Derek White this year to produce. And he will definitely contribute in threes and assists for me. But I think that he's got a pretty solid all-around game on top of that, low turnovers as well. What do you feel out of San Antonio? I mean, we talked about how the ceiling for Murray could perhaps be like that inside the top 30 in a best-case scenario. What do you feel is the best case for Derek White?
I've never been a huge Derek White guy. He could hit the top 50. I don't know that I necessarily predict it, but I do. He definitely has the potential to hit the top 50. And you were pick 60, so there's still some upside there.
Yeah,
I've never been the biggest White guy though.
Well, and that's fair. And look, I mean, he last year was really one of those chances for him to capitalize on a lot of hype and opportunity. But he proved himself to be a little bit injury prone. He also dealt with a bout of COVID as well. So there was that element tied in as well. But I'm really interested to see if he can take that next step as really one of these two main guys here.
So I am devastated by what happened after you. John Collins, who has no business being available at 60.
I was hoping he'd fall to me on the next
I didn't even realize he was still up there. That's what happens when you're talking while you draft instead of focusing on your draft. I just did. He must be really low on ESPN because I just didn't see him.
Lower than he should be, for sure.
Yeah. He should not be available at pick 60. That's silly. Jaren Jackson, I think that's great value there. And Robert Williams, I was really hoping that he would last a few more picks for me to take him.
Right.
I think that
was also
this is pure upside. I was arguing with someone on Twitter about Robert Williams today. I think that the only risk to him exceeding, this is what, pick 70, something like that. The only potential chance that he doesn't, I guess he was pick 60. The only chance that he doesn't finish above 60 in per game ranks is if he's hurt. Like that's the only risk. He's too good for that.
This is way, too low for that. And, I do think that his role will be relatively consistent just because he relies on, Atlanta. Shots have to be created for him, spot up opportunities, lob opportunities from Trey. But it will stay consistent. I'm about to get timed out here, but I'm going to go with another guy who's way too low on this board, over at rank 90, McCall Bridges, another low turnover, high percentages guy. Not the greatest. Again, this is a tough build to stick to the later I go on, but that's also because I really want to snag some of these value guys. I think that Bridges he's one of those guys who's just got a really stable fantasy floor. And for him to be going this low in ESPN, to me, screams of the points league influence.
Yes, I think that's right. And Darius Garland, I think, is another good value here. Yeah. I have him above. I have him above Sexton. So I think that's good. And then Cade Cunningham. We can talk about that in a second.
Right. The era before him was where my oof came into play. Maybe that was an auto pick. I don't. Unfortunately. Yeah. To y'all watching, Montrezl Harrell is not someone that you should be targeting with anywhere in your top 100 picks, but you probably didn't need to tune in to learn that one. Apologies again if that was an intentional team Raz. I'm sure you're like, I'm not judging any of that. I'm more so judging ESPN for putting them there for some reason.
Man,
I forgot. So you're on the clock here. So again, just to recap, after my McCall Bridges pick, actually, you kind of already did. Tyrese Halliburton went after him. I was kind of considering Halliburton there, but I just went guard. I think I could hold off on going another one. You got some choices here.
I'll pick another one who just shouldn't be available now, even though I don't really love him as a player. Mm-hmm. Miles Turner, ESPN do better.
He's way too low. Where's he down here on this board?
He was 79. That's silly. He's a top 40 player. This is like,
that's too much. That's far too low.
Like, I don't love him, but he is one of the 2 or 3 league leaders in blocks. He does some threes.
When he can win you that category on, you have him paired with Clint Capella, right?
Yeah.
So you're just going to run away with blocks in this league. I don't, assuming that you have those two healthy. I mean, those two alone will make
most weeks I'll be in pretty good shape. I mean, honestly, statement of how high I am on Robert Williams. Depending on who is on the Robert Williams team, they might do a good run for your money.
Well, let's take a look at that team too. I believe that's Stevie C. We have Westbrook, Jaylen Brown, Paul George, Jaren Jackson, Joel Embiid, and Robert Williams. Some injury risks on that team, but
absolutely
per game that could really pay off if these guys turn in some. I mean, a lot of injury risk, honestly.
Honestly, like per game, there is a chance that we are currently at pick 71. And that every single player on this team is top 30 per game at the end of the season, at least so far. That is in play. There is a ton of likely missed games here, but I love swinging. And I think that this team has done some good stuff in terms of taking players with legitimate upside. I actually really like what they've done.
I really like the Jaren Jackson pick too. On top of all of that, I think that not only is he coming into the season healthy, but they're going to try and roll him out as a center this year a little bit more. And we know that some of those traditional big man stats have been a little hard to come by for him. So I think that is, I'm really, really interested to see how that pans out. Following Miles Turner, Malcolm Brogdon went off the board. Isaiah Stewart went off the board, which I'm a little sad to see. I was just kind of hoping that ESPN.
You don't think that's a little high?
So here's my hot take, and given your Robert Williams infatuation, you might have to take some exception to it. But I can see a world where Isaiah Stewart beats him on a per game basis this season, and that's not me being low on Robert Williams. I'm really high on Stewart, and I know that I feel like that goes a little bit against consensus, but I do feel that I really just kind of I liked just the eye test, the way that he passed. Just watching some of those Pistons games, like I know they were bad. But when towards the end of the year where he and Sadiq Bey were in the starting lineup, and as was Killian Hayes, I just liked how those three really fit together. And I've been encouraged by some of the things that Dwayne Casey, who's notorious for being one of a fantasy manager's mortal enemy, just with some of his rotation decisions. He has said that he plans to play him and Olynyk alongside each other for stretches, something that I think is good for the value of both. But I don't know. There's just when you isolate Isaiah Stewart's numbers as a starter and assumes maybe a little bit of a bump by playing next to two playmakers in Killian Hayes and Cade Cunningham this year. I don't know. I can see a world where he's getting close to, and this is a hot take. I could see top 60, maybe even top 50 production in the best case scenario from the guy.
It's not crazy. Nothing you're saying is crazy. I think I'm not as optimistic as you are, but right. It's not like it's not like I'm sitting here saying, no, you're wrong about this, you're wrong about that. It's just,
but you can, by all means, I think that makes for good, that makes for good television, YouTube video, whatever here. So, you can trash me by all means, even if you don't really believe it. I don't know.
Can I trash the Cade Cunningham pick at 6'6" instead?
Go for it. I'm pretty sure Dan Vespers is in the chat, so he's going to be very happy to hear whatever you have to say.
Look, the numbers are irrefutable. Mm-hmm. Over the course of a career, we are really good. Like, draft pick does really do a good job of corresponding to how well players will play over the course of their career. The correlation between draft pick and career win shares is excellent. Mm-hmm. The correlation between rookie ADP and rookie fantasy finish is non-existent. It is abysmal. I went through it, and over the last, I've got this data going back to Kevin Durant's rookie year. So that's 07, I think?
That's
07, 08?
About 15 years almost.
Yeah. The only rookies who had the highest fantasy ADP and finished as the best rookie in fantasy were the wire-to-wire number one picks. So you got like in the real NBA draft. So Kyrie Irving, who was the whole year number one pick, Cat the whole year number one pick, Anthony Davis the whole year number one pick. Everyone else, or Ben Simmons was another one. Yeah. If you don't have that situation, then we are picking the wrong person first. And Cade Cunningham looks like a great prospect, but he was not a wire-to-wire one, so he doesn't fit the bill. The odds that he is the number one rookie at the end of the year is just really low. And so taking him in the 5th round, it's too much. Too much.
And in regards to rookies in general, too, I mean, like, think about some of the names that you just listed off there. I heard Karl Anthony Towns. I heard Anthony Davis. Ben Simmons is pretty big for his position. A big thing for rookies is rookie guards tend to struggle way more than their larger, like center and forwardy counterparts. Like field goal percentage is usually really abysmal. Turnovers are pretty poor. I was curious because I dug into something similar. Your research is far more extensive and sort of confirmed a little bit of what I found when I was specifically isolating rookie guards. Because I saw LaMelo Ball and Tyrese Halliburton doing some really impressive stuff. Over the last 10 years, there have only been 8 rookie guards to rank within the top 100. Like I'm pretty sure. I mean, maybe I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was something like that. I think Luka Doncic and John Wall rounded out as finishing around 100 exactly to make that 10. But it's really rare. Kyrie was really one of those exceptions as a traditional. I mean, not even a traditional point guard. He's just an elite scorer, and that's why he was able to rank so high. Yep. Damian Lillard in a similar capacity. Ben Simmons had the advantage of finishing at the rim often enough to where he wasn't really dragging you. He dragged you in plenty of other areas, but which he still does, like almost exactly to this day. And I'm on the clock, but yeah, I think that's I'm very skeptical of Cade and Jalen Green at their current ADPs.
Not in Dynasty. In Dynasty, go for it. In Dynasty, I love it. Seems like a great prospect. Yeah. But in redraft, I just don't think you can be taking Cade in the 6th round. I'm sorry to Team Olaf, and there are plenty of people who disagree with me. Olaf, you feel free to disagree with me and go talk to Josh Lloyd. He's more on your side, but I'm not there. While you're figuring out your pick, I did Jonas. Yeah, I did Jonas Valanciunas.
Not a fan of that pick, by the way. That should have been mine.
For it gives me a third center. He's another one who probably wouldn't be around in a different format on Fantrax, on Yahoo, or whatever. Mm-hmm. He should be going closer to the mid 50s, not in the late 60s or whatever I just took him in. Oh, took him at 78 or something. Wow. So happy for the value. There are a couple other people who I had my eye on, but I like the idea of sort of maybe wrapping up my centers and allowing me to move on from there.
Well, the centers, just like we talked about, they dried up pretty considerably at this range. And I think we're also noticing something with just how ESPN's points leagues really bleed into things here. The value is now all over the board at this stage of the draft. And it is really, a lot of points leagues guys are bubbling to the surface a little higher than I would have pegged, like Eric Bledsoe at 89. I don't even think that's a points league thing. I think that's just a name thing or something. Yeah. Like, it was really hard to find a big. I went with another Raptor, Chris Boucher, who's someone I really don't wind up with anywhere, especially in head-to-head, because he is a staple of inconsistency on a game-to-game basis. But at 83, there's almost no scenario where, even despite all the ups and downs, he's going to get there on the year, right?
I think he's not usually around this late, and so usually I'm pushing back when people pick Boucher. But at this late, I have no complaints. This is a bargain. This is if Chris Boucher is on the board here, go hog wild. Please take him.
Yeah,
this is exactly what you should be doing. If he's your fifth round pick, then I'm a little bit more skeptical, but he's not. So great value. Good job. Good job by you.
Oh, thank you. Also, funny enough, I went for a center too, because I thought that, I guess it hasn't caught up here yet, but Anthony Davis is only power forward eligible. There was, that news came out of that press conference where, maybe he's going to start at center. Things are up in the air, but given that roster construction, it seems likely that they have no choice but to roll him there for longer stretches than previously.
Jeremy Grant went after you. He's someone who I was higher on at the beginning of the year, and the more I've dug into it, I've been dropping him down my board steadily. I think that as the team around him gets a little bit better, and as we are better at pointing out his hot shooting at the beginning of the year, it looks a little bit worse. You're on the clock again.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm looking at guys that should be ranked in like the top after 150, all bubbling up to the surface here. I have no idea who to go with here. Especially this build is a lot harder to maintain, this punt threes and assists build at this stage of the draft, because a lot of these guys get values, at least from threes in particular. I agree with Jeremy Grant, by the way. He is someone who I think he nailed it, that he is, he was the number one option last year, but I'd say he's far from a priority on that team.
Yeah. Then D'Angelo Russell at the end of the seventh round, I think that's good value. It's sort of like Boucher. He's someone who's usually going a little earlier, and I don't like it, but getting it this late is fine. Oh, I love that. I love Mike Conley.
I just found him.
I love it. I think that's a great pick. We're always too afraid of Mike Conley. He's a really, really good player. He's still a really, really good player.
Doesn't fit the build at all, but I needed another point guard, and I just had no idea where else. I think it's way too low for him. He had some injuries concerns of the last few seasons, but I think that this is on a per game basis a layup.
Exactly.
Other picks that have gone off the board here after Mike Conley, we now see Kelly Olynyk, who is not unreasonable at that spot, but you're kind of losing out on potential value. Jonathan Isaac's a very interesting name at this spot for a lot of different reasons, as is Kimba. For Isaac, and this is stuff that I had concern with before any of the media day stuff that happened over the last few days. But he's in a situation now where he's coming off of this ACL injury. It was the ACL, right? It was
ACL or Achilles. Sometimes I forget.
Before, and he's obviously been very injury prone throughout his career, but he is someone who at his peak showed us that he could really, he could be a second round player. But he's the injury concerns, how long he's missed, and that fact that he's on an Orlando team that I project pretty low in terms of like real life NBA standings. Like they're not going to want him to play a lot of games for both his health
And they're
and for their position.
unpredictable. They're weird.
But I mean, at this spot, do you feel like you have no choice but to go for him for the upside alone?
I think you do have a choice, but I certainly think it's a reasonable pick because the upside is so good. The upside is so high that I'm not gonna hate on it.
Yeah.
I have nothing. The only thing bad to say is, as we covered at the top of the draft, I don't want vocally anti-vax people on my team. That makes it less fun for me personally, and this is supposed to be fun. But in terms of fantasy production, middle of the 8th round is just, there's so much upside and there's so little downside. And I was hating on Team Olaf a little earlier for their Cade pick, but I want to point out that I've loved everything they've done since. They took Kevin Porter Jr. Right after my Jonas Valanciunas pick, and I think that could be a really fun upside. And a little high for me for Kevin Porter Jr., but I do like him as a player. I think that he'll be fun. And then they took Kemba Walker, which I think is good value for Kemba. So I like both of that. And then whoever went right after me took Al Horford, and I love it.
You hate it?
No, I hated that. I hated that he didn't go. I just assume that I can wait forever and get Al Horford in every league, and
especially in an ESPN points-oriented fashion. I was surprised. I mean, I feel like you have to dig deep there. And I love Bogdan Bogdanovic also going around there. That you drafted him. So
that was me.
Would you? So he was someone I was considering if so much of his value wasn't tied up in 3-pointers and a little bit of assists too. But I mean, one of those questions. He had a top 30 stretch after returning from injury. It came without DeAndre Hunter. Do you feel that where's your expectations for him on the year? I mean, do you think that he's more reasonable as a top 50 guy? I mean, I think no matter what, you drafting him there is an absolute win value.
Yeah. I have him sort of right around 70 or so. So Norman Powell, who went a few picks before, maybe even a round before. I have usually I'm putting Bogdan on my queue, and then I'm putting Norman Powell right after him on my queue, and I have both of them in that sort of 70-ish range. Maybe Powell's a little bit lower, but I just like Powell and often am ending up with him. I'm expecting him to be better. He was hurt last year. He came back still kind of hurt, and working his way back and working his way into the flow, and he was still good. I don't have his exact finish in front of me, but it shouldn't be too hard to find. Bogdanovic. He finished 63rd in 8-cat, so this is 9-cat, but like I'm expecting him to do better than that. And I got him at what, pick 80? Oh, I'm on the clock.
Yeah, you are. I mean, it's the fun of a live draft. We're breaking down all these different angles here, but you got him almost near 90.
Yeah,
that's another layup right there. While you figure out who you're going with, we are within the 100 picks range, so I'm not going to be much more difficult to be critical. More so, just who do you really think can bust out in this area? We saw Thad Young go after Horford, where his situation's completely in flux. I don't think he plays. I think San Antonio wants to find a deal for him. I know that they have a couple of roster spots that they need to deal with. Like they're over the 15-man limit at the moment. Spencer Dinwiddie going after them, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 2 guys who are going to step into large usage roles this year. Wiggins after them, Jalen Green at the top of round 9. So Wiggins, Jalen Green back-to-back there from Collins. RJ Barrett, Ivica Zubac, Eric Bledsoe, and Dennis Schroeder off the board there. And now at pick 102. Wait, Alex.
All right. I'm going to take a boring pick. We're getting to the range of drafts. Getting to the range of drafts where I want to be taking bigger swings.
Yeah.
But I was on the clock and I was running out of time. So I went with Harrison Barnes. He's solid across the board anyways. He is useful for this punt assists and kind of punt defense builds that I've got. And, I was picking at pick 103. I would be shocked if Harrison Barnes finishes at 103 and not, at least top 80. So I'll take, I'll hit a single or a double there and let it go. And I'll start looking for some home runs with my next picks.
We have Evan Fournier, Keldon Johnson, and Kyle Anderson going right after you. I think Fournier is a great spot there. A guy who slept on in pretty much any draft format that you see, at the very least of just a guy who probably finishes a little above top 100 in New York. Keldon is tricky. His stat set's not friendly, but he is someone who is looking at a lot of opportunity in San Antonio, so it's not the worst dart throw in the world. Kyle Anderson is also a really stable pick. I'm going to go upside with this next one. Fits the build a little bit, but I am buried here at 166. I'm drafting Daniel Gafford, presumptive starting center for the Washington Wizards. And honestly, even if Thomas Bryant he will come back. I could see a scenario where Gafford holds on to that starting role regardless. I don't think Harrell is ever going to be a threat. He's a better bench player regardless. And I just think that Gafford has something there that in Washington that they just have been looking for, and that is just rim protection. He doesn't need a ton of time to turn in fantasy value for you. I mean, I think he was only averaging 18 minutes per game since being traded to Washington last year, and he was top 100 borderline off of that alone. He's going to be their starter to start the year. Thomas Bryant will come back and take some minutes off of him, but they're going to be. I think they might be a little careful with him. And frankly, as far as prospects are concerned, I'd say that Gafford is about the same level in terms of investment. He'll have that starting role, and like I said, he doesn't need a ton of playing time to be a fantasy value. So I'm all in on taking him after your first 100 picks. Yeah,
and I was harsh on Cade because of how high he went. But we were talking about someone else, and we missed Jalen Green going off the board, the first pick of round 9. That's right around pick 100. Yeah. Perfect. He's got incredible upside. Houston is going to let him go wild because they don't care if they lose. And I actually, if I had to guess, and I do not, I do. As we covered earlier, I think when it comes to ranking rookies, what we're doing is guesswork, don't call it analysis. That's not what it is. If I had to guess, I think Jalen Green finishes as the best rookie. And so getting him right at that pick 100 sounds great. That's perfect. It's all upside there. I absolutely love that pick. Good job, Jay Collins. Right after picking Andrew Wiggins, who might miss half the season.
Yeah, up in the air.
medium sure. Job, same Jay Collins. So, yeah.
Well, we have, after my Gafford pick, we have Bojan Bogdanovic. Mitchell Robinson going way too low. I think he's just kind of even if there are concerns about his availability to start the year. I mean, he's like Daniel Gafford with a little more polish, same boat. He doesn't need a ton of time to play, and hopefully, he ultimately gets out there for a majority of games. Isaiah Roby going after him, I'm not quite sure if I understand that one. I mean, it's possible that Roby he takes a step forward this year. Derek Favors is their presumptive starting center, but let's be honest, I don't have a lot of faith that he's going to be holding down that spot for very long. So it's something interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about his long-term upside. I don't know. Do you have
Roby? I don't want Roby. Yeah, I want Thunder, but not him.
So how do you feel about your strategy to this point of the draft? Do you feel like you were deficient in any particular area in terms of, like positional versatility, or do you feel like you've been able to stick to your build?
I have exactly one point guard.
Same. I have two.
I have Devin Booker, and that is my only point guard eligible player.
So not even a point guard.
Yeah, not even a real point guard. Yeah. Which, if you're punting assists, fake point guards are great.
Oh, absolutely. Colin Sexton's one of those guys. Depending on where you
DeJounte Murray's kind of a fake point guard. And I would have been happy to have him with this build, but he was gone way too early. But
oh my gosh, that's interesting.
Yeah, now you're on the clock.
I'm on the clock, and I was curious because I hadn't seen his name pop up here, and I'm not going to take him. Maybe we'll see how long he lasts here. But Evan Mobley is still available. Yeah. Where do you have any particular? I know we've been really rookie heavy a little bit here, but just briefly, do you have any thoughts on, his chances in Cleveland playing alongside Jared Allen and Lauri Markkanen this season? I'm gonna go look up the guy I actually want though.
I strongly support taking rookies after pick 100. I think it's a worthwhile use of upside. I think it's good use of draft capital. You're probably dropping your last couple picks anyways. Right. Mobley is not one of my preferred targets. I am worried about they have enough talent at big man positions that I am worried. Yeah, I'm worried about just when is he going to get worked in? Is he going to get meaningful minutes early in the season? Because if he's not, then we're going to end up dropping him, and he's going to help someone else later. All right, I'm on the clock. So I'm certainly not going to hate on the pick. I love taking rookies here, but he's not my preferred target.
So the guy that I ended up going with at that spot is Jayshawn Tate, someone who I think that the John Wall news benefits in a category league more than it does Kevin Porter Jr., who is the guy that people are focused on, just because I think that there's now an opportunity for him to play a lot more of these forward minutes that, KPJ theoretically would have occupied had John Wall been playing there. We saw him he's incredibly versatile, really high steals guy and high field goal percent guy, just a unique stat set. And frankly, Houston's a team that needs defenders where they can get him. So if you can get close to 20, somewhere in the high 20s in minutes, I think that this is a great value here. Very disappointed, though, to see DeAnthony Melton go right after him. Perhaps he's someone I should have targeted just as a not real point guard like we were talking about. I mean, he definitely could get you some assists, but his fantasy value is just so widespread across so many different areas. There's more opportunity for him in Memphis this year now that they've moved off of Grayson Allen, who really took a ton of those shooting guard minutes. You went with Scotty Barnes, another rookie off the board. We saw some positive comments from Nick Nurse the other day saying that we got to see it to believe it, but he said that he's going to force feed Scotty Barnes,
I hope so,
like minutes to start the season. So I mean, what do you see in that pick there?
Yeah, it's I like taking rookies late. I think that he is well positioned to get a lot of minutes and early. I am a little worried about what his shooting might do to my build. I hope that he doesn't get too many attempts, or that he's better than he looked at times when he was younger. But Toronto is a place where you got to trust the development and you got to trust the scouting. On draft night, when Scotty Barnes went off the board, my commentary, whatever I was doing at the time, was any other team makes this pick. And I would, be slamming them on Twitter, but it's the Raptors and they've earned the benefit of the doubt.
Are they the new Spurs to you?
Yeah.
Kinda, yeah. I mean, they have it. I mean, Masai Ujiri is about as elite as you can get in the front office. He's really rarely missed in his tenure in that spot.
So it's I gotta trust the institution there and say, all right, hopefully they know what they're doing. Hopefully he doesn't ruin my percentages. And worst case, 10th round pick, I'm probably dropping him in a week anyways.
3 picks that I really like that went right after you: Sadiq Bey, Joe Ingles, and Reggie Jackson. I think are all fair values at the late 100 teens at those spots. I'm likewise on Stewart. Maybe I've got a Pistons bias, but I'm high on Sadiq Bey as well coming into this season, mostly just because, again, just isolating his numbers as a starter in Detroit last year, he was close to right where he just got drafted. He was about top 115, and that was with a field goal percent sub 40%, which is a number that I just feel kind of has to climb back up by default, especially with more guys to help get him the ball in advantageous positions. So solid source of threes and steals at that spot. Joe Ingles is just chugging along value as he usually does. And Reggie Jackson's gonna be an interesting name. I saw a report.
There won't be a point guard who goes off the board later who does better than Reggie Jackson. I think we can say that confidently. You got the last best one.
I saw an interesting report that Ty Lue and he says it's not set in stone, but his initial impressions on who his starting backcourt will be both Reggie Jackson and Eric Bledsoe. Which in my mind would actually mean that he envisions Reggie as more of a shooting guard in that tandem. Do you feel that? I mean, do you see it that way, or I mean, what is your read on Reggie as a fantasy option this year after an electric playoffs from him?
I don't think he'll be as good as he was at his best in the playoffs, but I do think that I am glad to hear that he's going to be a starter, and I think that Bledsoe might not be. I think that it's good that Reggie Jackson was listed, and Bledsoe might be the one who we're just sort of saying it because we want to try to boost his confidence to see if he's got anything left in the tank. But they're going to be willing to pull that early. So I don't really believe the second half. I guess I believe the Reggie, and I don't believe the Bledsoe, which maybe that's selective.
I mean, it is early. I mean, and Terrence Mann, I know, is a guy that people have penciled in as someone who could have a breakout year, breakout of sorts.
I would not be surprised if Mann replaced Bledsoe in that. I'm glad. That's sort of what I'm saying. Is I'm glad to hear that it was Reggie and Bledsoe, not Bledsoe and Mann, because
that
I would have
been concerning.
Mann, and I would have believed Bledsoe over Reggie. But the fact that they're starting with Reggie, I feel like they're sort of setting us up for the Mann just passed Bledsoe. What do you want me to do down the line? Which is something that teams do sometimes, and I'm hoping to see it.
Man, I just got sniped on that pick right there. I was so excited about possibly getting Chuma Okeke taken by Wrong Way Ricky. Before him, Brooke Lopez, Wendell Carter, and Klay Thompson off the board. Thompson is a really tricky guy, but I guess I can't hate taking him at this range. I'm just glad it's not within the first 100 picks. But he's really going to play pretty sparingly this year, I would imagine. DiVincenzo, Daniel Tice, and Jordan Clarkson following those guys. You're on the clock now, so I'll let you figure your next pick. Yeah.
So I know who I'm taking. I'm waiting for you to catch up because I think so. I think there are two things you can do late in a head-to-head draft.
Yeah.
You can just take absolute swings at upside, or you can get category-specific guys who you're not planning on using early in the week, but who you might want to use later in the week to try to help you get all the way there. So, right now I'm looking at Duncan Robinson, who in Roto I wouldn't take this late. In a deeper league, I wouldn't take right now. Right. But I have a build that requires I win 3-pointers every week. So I want that 3-point expert on my bench to help me if I need it late in the week. So I'm trying to balance, I took a swing with my last pick. Now I'm taking someone who helps me in my category specific needs. And, but DeAndre Hunter, who went directly after me, I think has way more upside.
Great pick. Yeah.
I have to say it's a better pick than what I did, but it just is, hopefully Duncan Robinson wins me a couple of weeks and it pays off. But it's hard to argue that Robinson should go ahead of Hunter. I don't want to make that argument.
Again, at this spot, and I mean, Hunter's I don't even know where he was on the board. I've been scrolling for a while now.
I didn't even see him. I made it into the 250s.
I don't even. I'm now looking at my team, and this is maybe this could just transition into an argument for how you orient positions. I have 2 point guard eligible players and 2 shooting guard eligible players, and one of those guys is the same guy, and that's Derek White. So I need to draft someone that I need to draft someone. Really, I want to find someone who can play both positions, but I'm now kind of forced to choose a player there that I don't want. I'm a fan of going guard, forward, center, and leaving it at that. I was put onto that last year, and I don't think I want to go back to another format just because I can't stand losing out on potential value guys for this particular reason. But even though this guy doesn't fit my build, he does fit some positional scarcity on my roster. I'm going to take him just to make a point. TJ McConnell is an absolute, I think, home run at 130. I mean, he is someone who I think has cemented a pretty solid role in the low to mid 20s. And I think in that capacity, he doesn't need shots to be effective. I mean, he was one of the league leaders in assists and steals last year. I mean, especially if you find that you have the point guard market is dried up. He's a low name recognition type of player that you can get if you're 100 picks, who has a much higher upside than a lot of these other guys, I think.
I think his upside is not as that high. I think that you're right that it's good value here.
Okay.
Does that
do you feel that feel it's just more that what we saw was just more of a product of all their injuries and him kind of playing over his pay grade, just not being utilized by Rick Carlisle in the same way?
Kind of.
It's fair.
Yeah, kind of.
It's totally fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's likely to outproduce pick 130. I would be surprised if his per game rank was not better than that. I don't think you have a chance at a top 75 player there. But
well,
maybe
I mean that would obviously be the top of the
yeah.
That'd be amazing. I probably not going to have as high a finish as he had last year. After him, we see Marvin Bagley, Will Barton, Nerlens Noel, and Brandon.
Nerlens Noel should have gone way higher, and that's another product of ESPN's funky ranks. Is
totally.
Noel is a top 100 pick. He should be a top 100 pick. This is just sort of silly. And Brandon Clark, as good as he was early in his career, Memphis just has too many options now. He shouldn't be going this high. Brandon Clark is barely draftable after being the second best rookie. Back to our point, the second best rookie when he was a rookie. Yeah. He's barely draftable now because of the situation he's in. Matisse Thybulle is another one very similar to my Duncan Robinson pick. In head-to-head leagues, I like picking someone like that late because he can help you with the categories that you will need help in. He might not get a ton of minutes. He doesn't do a lot outside of defense, but you're going to have some weeks where you're late in a matchup and what you need is defense, and he can win you some weeks because of that. So I'm going to do something interesting strategically. So in ESPN's football drafts, they require you to take someone at every position.
Right.
And because ESPN put Devin Booker at shooting guard when I drafted him, and they don't let me move him, ESPN thinks I don't have a point guard. Yeah. I don't want to take a point guard right here. And so we're going to see whether ESPN requires me to take a point guard with the last pick, because that's something good to know. I've never been in this situation.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to take one of my favorite late round targets, who
Let's
is
keep an eye on your team, by the way, for this experiment.
Yeah. Baby Robert Williams, Nick Claxton.
Ooh.
Who, they removed everyone except point guards from the board. ESPN, fix your stuff.
Please. There's still some really gross things going on down here. I have a feeling that you and I are like missing an easy top 100 player who's like buried after the 200.
We are.
Certainly somewhere. I don't know who it is, but
there were a few that were on my queue that weren't point guards and have just been removed from my queue.
So let's just go real quick, rapid fire after my Thybulle pick, who, by the way, I think is low-key might have higher upside for a potential Ben Simmons trade than Tyrese Maxey, but that's probably for another show.
I didn't realize I was complimenting you. Good job. Okay, thank you. I thought I was just complimenting one of the other people.
Jaden McDaniels, another high hype train kind of guy, going right after him. Hassan Whiteside, Tyrese Maxey, your pick of Nick Claxton, Joe Harris, Malik Beasley, Kyle Kuzma, Josh Giddey, and Larry Nance have all gone off the board. We are now into our final round here. This is where y'all can get crazy and really just go for some moonshot upside.
Nance is a top 100 guy.
I'd say so.
He is.
I think Joe Harris honestly is too, just especially if Kyrie Irving's missing a lot of time. Joe is just, he was basically on the border of it last year. I know he didn't have a really good playoffs, but as far as Brooklyn Nets with consistent roles, it's clearly the 3 stars, then Harris in a tier of his own, and then everyone else.
Yep,
So that's a very solid pick at that spot.
Yep. And, Nick Claxton is their best center, but that doesn't mean he's going to get enough minutes to matter. He might be a quick drop.
Ton of vets that will get some opportunities ahead of him.
But if Nick Claxton gets 25 minutes a game, he can put up, more than one steal a game, more than one block a game, excellent percentages, good rebounds. So I love him. I love the swing of Şengün. He was at the top of my queue.
Yeah, it's a very solid final pick.
Thomas Bryant, if he were healthy, he should be going earlier than this. And now they're making me take a point guard. So who I would have been taking.
So what are you seeing right now on your end? Like, they won't let you draft other players.
They removed everyone from my queue.
Wow.
And the only picks that I can see on the players available are players who are point guard available.
Unbelievable.
So Jesus. I've got Ricky Rubio at 128, then it jumps to John Wall at 132. It goes from Steph Curry at 151 to Cole Anthony at 157, etc.
Good to know for your drafting ESPN.
Yeah, very good to know. I think that there is a clear top 100 pick left who I was going to take right now. I would be taking Gary Trent and talking about him. I love Gary Trent.
Well, go ahead. You can go ahead and talk about him. We could just disregard who you take for that point. What do you see in Gary Trent in the 9-cat league this year?
Poor man's Norman Powell. They were traded for each other, and they have a lot of similarities. I think that he's the fourth guy. You got Damian Lillard. You got McCollum. I got a draft. Brunson. I like Brunson. I probably should have taken Ricky Rubio, but I like Brunson.
No, I think that
you guys know about Ricky Rubio, so let me point out that Jalen Brunson is good as well.
Now we are up after him, Rui and TJ Warren. That's a fine spot for TJ, especially if he can get back on the floor in some capacity. That's an easy win.
Oh yeah.
I'm juggling a few different guys that I want to go with my final pick. There's no real moonshot guy that I can really go with. I feel like I really haven't taken that many risks. Not that there's any such thing as a risk at this point. But I like Bobby Portis this year because I think that Brook Lopez is going to take a step back just to get himself ready for the playoffs. A pretty old guy coming off a championship run. They just re-signed Bobby, and it makes a lot of sense to give him more opportunity in the role that he was in. He was a borderline top 100 guy. So I think that he's an under the radar guy who could be helpful, as is Marcus Morris. I think he's second on the team in shot attempts this year. He's not an intriguing.
Not crazy.
He's not that intriguing. But what's happening with him this year reminds me a little bit of how people slept on him when he was that 1 or 2 option in New York a couple seasons ago. But I'm going to go with someone who I've recently started. This one's way off the radar. No one's talking about him. I'm drafting Terrence Ross. Everyone's saying that he's completely written off because he's not a part of Orlando's plans, but he's still on the team.
Yeah,
they need wing depth. He's on a favorable contract. They probably want to trade him. I think that he could be pretty productive, and so I think that not an exciting pick by any stretch, but that is the one I went with. And Steven Adams, and I like the last pick of Jordan Poole too. Honestly, I should have gone there.
I like the pick that went right before me of Davis Bertans. He's a huge bounce back candidate. He was easy top 100 for a while and then just looked so bad last year. But the Wizards' whole season was messed up. The Wizards had to take 2 weeks off. It was a weird year to be a Wizards. As you're literally your last pick, Bertans is a great upside pick. Usually upside is younger, but
no, I completely agree. And Washington's just filled with so much uncertainty at pretty much every spot outside point guard and shooting guard. So one of those guys is going to rise above the fray in some capacity, and Bertans probably has the highest 9-cat ceiling of that bunch. So that's the draft there. I mean, what is let's just talk large takeaways. Let's talk about drafting in 9-category leagues on ESPN, Alex. After this experience, what would you recommend to someone trying to give that a shot?
There's a lot of value late. There is just so much value late. ESPN's ranks are just not that great. And so I think that especially if I know at this point that I'm higher on Michael Porter Jr. than most, and I'm getting him a lot. I've done a bunch of these, point percentage is my strength and punt assist teams. I've done a couple of those, and so I have a good sense for who the late round guys are. Whoever it is that you're high on early and you're likely to get, figure out what late round picks will build around that, or figure out what middle round picks will build around that, and then you can get that value late. It's okay to reach in the middle if there's so much value late. If you can get a top 100 player with pick 130, then you can take a bigger swing at 70 or 80. In hindsight, where's that team? Team Olaf was the one who had Cade. In hindsight, yeah, they got the team with Cade. They got Tatum, which I love. They got Tobias Harris, which is solid value. They got Edwards, which is great value. And they took DeAndre Hunter and Maxey late. So they got such great late value that it doesn't look as bad in hindsight as I felt in the moment of why are we spending a pick this high on Cade? I think that's one of my big takeaways right now is just we can take bigger swings in the middle.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, especially like you touched on, just there are so many guys buried down on these rank boards here. This is one of the more erratic post 100 picks that I've seen in most mocks that I've looked at this year. I mean, really, if you go in with a solid plan for a punt, I mean, I would really parse through ESPN's rankings. I don't know how frequently they update them, if they do at all after their initial release. This is definitely the type of thing where you should dig deep on where they have guys, how far they have fallen. And I think that going into a draft with a solid punt strategy, factoring those in, that is a real big plus for a 9-category league on this particular platform. Do you feel satisfied with your team when it's all said and done? Bring you up right.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I do. The Barnes and the Barnes pick is kind of boring. The Harrison Barnes. I like the Scotty Barnes. The Harrison Barnes pick is kind of boring. If I knew that I'd be able to get JV another round later, there were some other guys who I would have liked to have. I would have taken Malcolm Brogdon instead of Miles Turner. Miles Turner was great value where I got him, but I didn't want him. I wanted someone else. And if I knew I was going to have that value of Jonas later, I probably would have gone a different direction. But overall, I think I kind of nailed it. I'm not as good at points as I wanted to be, but I'm still pretty good at points. And I got the percentages down and not wasting any value on assists. That's for sure.
Certainly in that respect. I feel pretty good about how mine came up. I was able to stick to, it was a lot easier to stick to the build when, things were guys were a little easier to find. I went incredibly heavy on steals, way heavier than I thought I was going to. Anunoby, McCall Bridges, Jayshawn Tate, TJ McConnell, Matisse Thybulle, Jimmy Butler. If you're running away with blocks, I got that covered in steals, and maybe that can, if this were a real league, maybe I could find a way to get some value out of that with a trade later on. But I feel pretty satisfied with what I came to here. I think solid percentages, relatively low turnover team, good in rebounds and both defensive stats really. And similarly, I don't think I got enough points, but I think
I wonder what would happen with your team with field goal percentage.
Yeah.
So field goal percentage isn't that sticky year to year, and your worst field goal percentage guys don't take a ton of shots. If Conley and Thybulle are on the low end of their range, if Jimmy Butler has just an average season, you could end up. I'm not saying I predict it, but you could end up one of the worst teams in field goal percentage pretty easily if a couple things don't go your way.
That's actually, that's a fair point, especially, Derek White's another guy who really tanked you there last year. Boucher is another guy who, it's not actually as clean as you might think in that capacity. So there's definitely that one might be shakier than it ultimately wound up being. And, I think in this build, I'd try and do something about Mike Conley. Maybe I'd trade him at some point in the year because he doesn't fit what I'm doing at all.
I think that's right.
This is the last second kind of like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do?
But that's a very good value. And it was such good value when you got him. Like, I think it's a great, it was the right pick to make at the time. But yeah, someone you probably want to trade.
Yeah. Biggest takeaway, again, value all over the board.
Value all over the place.
If you want to do a category leagues draft and you want to, if you follow the stuff we do at Hoopball, if you follow the stuff that Alex does, you will find value at every round. Any final thoughts before we drop off here?
No, it was fun. It was fun. Yeah. Good job. Thanks to the people who came in. Please don't be offended about the picks I liked and focus on the ones I complimented. I certainly not trying to offend anyone here. This was fun, and I'm just trying to provide honest commentary because no one's helped if I'm sitting here saying great pick, great pick, great pick. But please don't take offense. I'm not trying to be mean here. Just trying to help you win your league and help all of us do better.
Tons of interesting thoughts, and exactly why I was excited to bring you on, because I've heard you do some spots with other people. Like you opinionated people are exactly who you want in this spot. So a ton of thanks again, y'all. You should follow his work on RotoWire. Follow him on Twitter at Rikleen. You can see it right down there at the bottom. Alex, I really hope to do more stuff with you at some point in the future. It's just a ton of fun. Everyone, please drop a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel for more stuff like this. We are rolling all the way up to your fantasy draft. Even if it's the day before the season, we'll have stuff for you. So keep an eye out for more content we got coming up in the future. And until then, we will check with you next time. See you, everyone.